Hello, my name is Chris Fisher, and I'm a photographer, a former physics teacher, and a birder. And my wife and I created this program about 10 years ago to help various friends and organizations who had asked us about birding learn a little more about how to get into birding. So I hope you enjoy this program. Thank you. Welcome to Birding 101. The purpose of this program is to teach you a little about birds and maybe even change your relationship to them. My relationship, you say? What's that? What kinds of relationships can someone have with birds? Well, let's take a look. Almost everyone is bird aware. I'm going to try and move you towards becoming a bird watcher. And if you're already a bird watcher, maybe move you into becoming a birder. Everyone who can see and hear is bird aware. It's pretty hard not to notice birds. They fly around us, make all kinds of noises, and frequently, like you see here, can look pretty dramatic. But when you're only bird aware, you may see and hear them, but that's about it. The next step for a lot of people is feeding the birds so we can actively watch them. When you really take time to look at them come and go, then you become a bird watcher. Our parents did that, and my wife and I still do. Let's look at a few of the birds that come to our feeder that you might recognize. These are a black-capped chickadee and a Carolina wren. I'm going to show you a short movie of some of the birds that come to our feeder. As we're watching, see if any of them look familiar. I'll name them as we go along. This is a mourning dove, a white-breasted nuthatch, the upside-down bird, the Carolina wren and chickadee again, here's a female downy woodpecker. The male would have red on the back of his head. Some people think this is a red-headed woodpecker, but it's actually the red-bellied woodpecker. The red on its belly is very faint and hard to see. Here's a friendly tufted titmouse. These are house finches. The males have reddish heads and shoulders. The females are gray and stripy. That's a house sparrow in the background which just flew in. It's actually a finch imported from Europe. The purple finch, female, has a white stripe over her eye. The males look like they've been dipped in raspberry juice. This bird is disliked by a lot of people because it's so common, but it's really quite a beautiful bird. It's a European starling. The snowbird, the dark-eyed junco. One of my favorite winter birds is this white-throated sparrow. Here's a group of young cedar waxwings. Where did everybody go? One of our smartest birds is the American crow. And this blue jay is a close cousin of the crow. People say we don't have colorful birds like the tropics do, but look at the patterns and color on this blue jay. Now we're going to stop for a minute with this American robin. Do you know what's special about the robin for those of us in Connecticut where we live? It's the state bird of Connecticut, as well as of Michigan and Wisconsin. That makes it the fourth most popular state bird. Any idea what the most popular state bird might be? It's the northern cardinal. 7 states have named it their bird. And do you know why we in Connecticut didn't choose the cardinal for our state bird? Simple, because it wasn't here when we were choosing. It's a relative newcomer, which has been moving north as the climate has warmed. While popular, it's used only in eastern states because it doesn't actually live in much of the West. But the second most common state bird is one that isn't found at all in the East. This beautiful bird is the western meadowlark. There is also an eastern meadowlark which looks similar but has a different sounding song. 6 states have the western meadowlark as their bird, and 5 states have the northern mockingbird. Okay, enough about state birds. If you like to actually stop and look at birds from time to time and maybe feed them so you can see them better, then you're a bird watcher, and that's good. But maybe you're now ready to move from being a bird watcher to being a birder. What's a birder, you ask? A birder goes a few steps further than just watching birds. First, a birder tries to identify birds. A birder knows how to use a field guide. A birder uses binoculars. A birder travels places to see new birds, maybe just to the next town for a local bird walk, maybe to another part of our country, or maybe to other countries. And finally, a birder keeps a list of birds they've seen. Now, if you look at this list, you'll notice that the first 3 items go together, kind of naturally. Trying to identify birds is usually going to make use of 2 important tools: a bird guide and binoculars. So let's learn a little about each of these things. There are many, many bird guides. If you go to Amazon and type in bird guide, you get over 10,000 results. What's a person to do? There are many kinds of guides, and each has its own advantages and disadvantages. You will find that really serious birders have their favorites and sometimes carry more than one. So let's learn about things to consider as you make your own choice. In the very small group pictured here, you can see that some guides are big, nice at home, but hard to carry in the field. And some are smaller and easier to carry. Some cover all of North America, while some just cover one state or area. Some only specialize in one kind of bird, like this one, on shorebirds, or this one, on warblers. But there's more to guides than just those features. Choosing some of these features may seem pretty obvious, but let's look more closely at 2 of these guides, the Sibley Guide and the Kaufman Guide. There are other differences which might not be so obvious at first glance to a beginning birder. Let's pick a bird to look at. Here's a duck we don't see in the east, but it's pretty common out west. It's a small duck called a cinnamon teal. Let's see how this bird is treated in each of these guides. A lot of beginning birders say to themselves, I think photographs in a bird guide would be a good idea, because then you see exactly what the bird really looks like. The Kaufman Guide is a hybrid photographic guide. I say hybrid because the photographs have been digitally enhanced. The backgrounds have been removed, which makes it easier to use than some photographic guides. Kaufman puts several related species on one page, which can be helpful in finding what you're looking for. Here, we have 5 different species with the information on the left page and the pictures on the right page. He also includes the pictures, range maps, and text all in the same place. Some guides unfortunately separate these things. Have you found the cinnamon teal? It's right here. Notice he also includes a female and a small image of one in flight. That all seems pretty helpful. However, my own feeling is that the problem with photographic guides, and I'm a photographer, remember, is that a photograph shows the bird in one particular lighting situation. As you start to look more carefully at birds, you will find that the colors and the look of birds change remarkably as they move and turn in sunlight and shadow, so a photograph may tend to be misleading. Now let's look at how Sibley treats the same bird in his guide. This layout looks quite different. Sibley is an artist and paints all his bird pictures. An artist can combine various lighting situations and give you, in my opinion, a better idea of what the bird will look like under various conditions in the field than you can get with a single photograph. Notice that there are just 4 species of ducks on these 2 pages as opposed to Kaufman's 5, and the layout is quite different. It's in columns. Here's the cinnamon teal column. Instead of Kaufman's 3 photos, we have 8 paintings here. Look closely at the breeding male, and then the non-breeding male. From July to September, the duck looks entirely different, and Kaufman didn't give us a clue about that. Notice Sibley includes a juvenile, another phase the Kaufman guide did not have. On many of the paintings, as you see on these 2, you find helpful notes about how to identify the bird in the field, or things to be careful about. Diane and I have found both the general layout, the inclusion of non-breeding and juveniles, and the other extra information in the Sibley guide to be very helpful to us as beginning birders. So let's summarize what you might want to think about when getting a bird guide. What geographic area does it include? Is it a convenient size and weight to carry? Is the layout such that information is easily accessible? Does it use photographs or artwork, and which do you like better? Does it include variations of a species, male, female, juvenile, breeding, and non-breeding? Does it highlight important field marks? Oh, wait a minute. There is another very important option to consider when it comes to bird guides. Let's look at the next page. If you happen to own a smartphone or a tablet which can run apps, then there's another option, and a pretty cool one. There are several birding applications you can keep right on your phone and take with you anywhere. One of the first was iBird, which comes in many different versions. It contains drawings, photographs, maps, sounds, and an amazing amount of information about birds, their nesting and feeding behavior, and more. Depending on the version you choose, it can contain only local birds or over 900 species for all of North America. It can also have an unmatched search engine, allowing you to enter over 45 characteristics of a bird to search for, including ones like song patterns. You can get anything from a free version up to the pro version, which at just $15 is a real bargain. Sibley has also taken his entire book and created his own iPhone app, just recently updated to version 2. It is also very user-friendly and is good competition with iBird Pro. It has all the drawings, maps, and texts from his large guidebook. They both have notes on the drawings and the ability to play a variety of bird songs. Look at similar species and listen to several different sounds for each species. Again, at $20, it's a bargain. At those prices, I'd consider getting both. iBird seems to do a better job of updating as names and species change, but Sibley's has wonderful drawings and seems to be a little easier to use. There are others as well, but these 2 seem to be the primary ones. So that gives you a lot to think about for bird guides. Now, let's look at the other major birding tool. So we want to get binoculars. But how do you buy binoculars? Do you try to get them as big as you can? Or really small? Do you spend just a little, maybe $25? Or do you spend more than $2,000? There are so many to choose from. Well, if you're just starting, here are some suggestions. Don't go for super powerful. The more they magnify, the harder they are to hold steady. A pair of 8x42 is pretty standard for birding. That means a magnification of 8, and 42 relates to the wideness of the field of view. Spend enough to get a good pair. You can get some decent ones in the $50 to the $150 range, and for just over $200, Vortex Diamondbacks have remarkable optics and a lifetime no questions asked warranty. So do a little research. Whatever you get, make sure you know how to use them. Many people never learn to properly use their binoculars. Using binoculars isn't hard, but you do need to know a couple of things, and then you need to practice. First, you must adjust them for your own eyes. Here's how to do that. Most binoculars have a central focus knob. When you turn this, you adjust the focus of both eyepieces together. But there's a bit more you must do before they will be matched to your own eyes. First, examine the two eyepieces that you look through. One is fixed, usually the left one. I know that looks like the right, but we're looking at these from the top and front. The other, usually the right one, is adjustable. That is, it turns. Here are the steps to set the binoculars for your eyes. First, choose some object about 30 feet away from you. Cover the right eyepiece, the adjustable one, or close that eye. Look through the fixed eyepiece and use the focus knob to make the object appear sharp. Now cover the left eyepiece, the fixed one, or close that eye. Look through the adjustable eyepiece at the object, but do not touch the focus knob. Turn the adjustable eyepiece until the object appears sharp. Now look through the binoculars at anything and focus using only the focus knob. Do not touch the adjustable eyepiece again. Note where the mark on the adjustable eyepiece is so you can reset it easily. Once the binoculars are set for your eyes, you need to spend some time practicing with them. As a beginner, finding what you're looking for can be a challenge. Let's watch Diane a moment. She'll help demonstrate what not to do as well as what you should do. First, don't look all around while you're looking through the binoculars. You'll get sick really fast. Resist the temptation to look down at the binoculars as you bring them up to your eyes. Instead, practice doing this. Using only your eyes, find and look at what you want to see. Then, without moving your head, bring the binoculars up to your eyes as you continue to look at the object. You should be able to see it in the binoculars. If you don't, try it again, being very careful not to move your head. If you pick out several stationary objects 30 or 40 feet away and practice doing this over and over, it will gradually become easier to do. Finally, get a comfortable binocular strap like this one, not a neck strap. This will make wearing binoculars all day effortless. So let's review these thoughts. Just with your eyes, find what you want to see through the binoculars. Look for movement in the trees or on the ground and keep your eyes focused on that movement. Without moving your head, lift your binoculars up to your eyes as you continue to look at the object. Using a variety of fixed objects Keep practicing this over and over until you always see the object the first time. If you are looking for a bird in a certain tree, pre-focus on the tree so that when you bring up the binoculars, the bird will already be in focus. Get a good binocular harness for all-day comfort. The next thing we're going to consider is how to identify birds. By that, I mean, how do we get a clue as to where to look in that bird guide to find a bird? The two things you're most likely to notice right away are size and color. Let's look at a bird. When you see this bird, consider its size and color. What descriptive words might come to mind? Small and blue-green. This is a green-violet ear hummingbird in Costa Rica. Let's try another one, just focusing on the size and color. Of course, this one is big and pink. This is an American flamingo, which is almost never seen in the United States, but is not uncommon in the Caribbean and the Galapagos Islands. This one we saw in the Galapagos Islands. Of course, a different species of flamingo, Flamingus plasticus, is common around many front lawns and in trailer parks around the U.S. Okay, both of these examples were pretty easy for telling size and color. Of course, most birds aren't at those extremes. They're just kind of average birds. Like this one. Think about how you might describe the size of this bird. Medium doesn't really help much. What often works is to compare it in size to a common bird with which you are familiar. Would you say this is closer to a sparrow size, a robin size, or a crow size? I would say a robin size. The more you bird, the more familiar you will become with the relative sizes of birds. For color, this bird is mostly black and white, with a red cap and a whitish yellow under the eye and throat. Does anyone know what this bird is? It's an acorn woodpecker. We saw it in Arizona. Is there anything else about this bird that might give a clue to the fact that it's a woodpecker? Look at that bill. It's clearly designed for digging into things. You don't have to be an experienced birder to see that it's a woodpecker bill. Bills, or beaks, tend to be related to the kind of food a bird eats. Blackbirds usually eat seeds and have a conical-shaped beak typical of many seed eaters. A tree swallow does most of its eating on the fly, snatching small insects out of the air. It has a very tiny bill. The American avocet has the long bill and long legs often seen on a wading bird. These bills are good for poking down into the sand or mud to find little critters to eat. In this case, the bill has a slight upturn at the end, which is an unusual feature, making it easier to identify in the bird book. The prothonotary warbler has a typical warbler bill, slender and sharp, which it uses for picking at insects along the leaves and branches of trees. Another clue when you look at a bird is to pay attention to the overall shape of the bird. That can often give you a starting point as to what group of birds you should look under in your field guide. The white-tailed ptarmigan has a shape that is typical of game birds. It's kind of chicken-like. The Cassin's finch has that round finch or sparrow-like look with no real neck. Hawks, like this Swainson's hawk, tend to appear long and sleek with a head that extends right out from their body. Plovers, whether by the shore or in the upland grassy areas like this unusual mountain plover, tend to have medium-length legs, a body that's not as round as the finch, but not as long as the hawk, and a roundish head. Now, while we were looking at these four birds, I hope you also paid attention to the bills. Why is the hawk's bill good for what it eats? It's curved and sharp, to help it tear into the flesh of other birds and small mammals that form its diet. The finchbill is that conical shape of the seed eater, while the ploverbill is good for foraging on the ground for grasshoppers, beetles, flies, and crickets. When looking at birds, pay attention to where they are and what they are doing. Warblers, like this yellow-rumped warbler, are usually in the woods, high up in the trees and moving very quickly from branch to branch. The eastern kingbird is a flycatcher. Flycatchers almost always perch on branches, posts, or wires and patiently look for insects in the air around them. They will dart out to catch the insect and then often return to the same perch. In Colorado, this green-tailed towhee, like many towhees, is most often seen or heard scratching around on the ground, foraging for food. And if you see a bird spending all its time on the rocks near the water or in the water, it's a good bet it's a water bird. Of course, the webbed blue feet on this blue-footed booby in the Galapagos Islands are another clue. These birds actually dive for fish from 40 or 50 feet above the water and then swim underwater with their webbed feet to catch them. Okay, so that's a pretty corny transition, but I had to use it once. So, learning to bird by ear is a whole art form in itself. That's really not birding 101. It's more like birding 707. Certainly there are a few calls that are common enough that many of us would recognize them. One such example is the black-capped chickadee, singing its name, chickadee-dee-dee. Listen to that call. However, the problem is that most birds have many songs. For example, here's another song that's almost as common as that one. So that was a chickadee too, and here's a chickadee going on with various chips and calls, none of which sound particularly familiar. Blue jays can imitate hawks, as well as make lots of very odd sounds, and titmice have lots of calls that often confuse even experienced birders. When I first started birding, a trip leader told me that if you hear a call and don't know what it is, it's probably a titmouse. However, there is one thing that I wish someone had told me early on that is helpful to know about the bird songs that you find written out in bird books. Let me give you an example. This is a white-throated sparrow, and it has a very distinctive call, which is sometimes described as Old Sam Peabody, 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 at least here in New England. However, if you are in Canada, they will tell you that it sounds like Oh, sweet Canada, Canada, Canada. Here's the song. Listen and see what you think. What I want you to understand is that those two phrases are not giving you the actual sounds. Peabody and Canada don't sound anything alike. But what it is giving you is the rhythm and emphasis of the song. If you just pay attention to that and ignore the words, both phrases are the same. Da, da, ta-da-da, ta-da-da, ta-da-da. Listen again. So you can make up your own phrases for the sounds you hear. But if you read one in a book, remember, it's the emphasis and rhythm, not the actual words. So that's it for the listening part. There's a lot to learn about bird calls, so if you're just beginning, wait until you get more familiar with a lot of birds and their habits and habitat before you worry too much about their calls and songs. So let's summarize how to identify birds. Look at their size. Use birds you are familiar with for comparisons. Is it a robin size, a sparrow size, or a crow size? Pay attention to color. In some birds that can be very helpful, but many birds are kind of drab, especially females. If there is color, where is it? Look at the beak. That is often a good clue to what kind of food it eats, which can then help you find what family it belongs to. Look at the shape. Become familiar with the general size and shape of families of birds. Pay attention to the habitat and behavior. And listen to their calls and sounds. Before we close our book on Birding 101 and share with you a few pictures of some of the birds we've seen in our travels, let us give you a few hints and ideas that others have shared with us that might help you get started making the transition from bird watcher to birder. Number one, the best way to learn birding is to do birding. Let me repeat that. The best way to learn birding is to do birding. Next, join a group like Hartford Audubon. Many bird groups offer bird walks and other activities for both beginning and experienced birders. And while some groups charge for these, in Hartford Audubon, they're all free. When you are birding and meet other birders, tell them you're a beginner and ask about what they've seen. Most birders are very friendly and love to help new birders. We've had some who spent the rest of the day showing us around an area. Don't be discouraged. It takes seeing birds over and over and over before they start to sink in. When you're with really experienced birders, they make it seem so easy, but it takes a long time. Keep doing it. See number one. Focus on becoming very familiar with the common birds first. Learn their jizz, their general size and shape. Once you know this, it's easier to quickly tell if a new bird is one with which you are familiar. A great place to start birding is Florida in the wintertime. Lots of birds winter there, and they tend to be big birds that stand very still while you thumb through your bird guide. Speaking of bird guides, keep in mind that birds, like people, have a lot of variation in how they look. So don't get frustrated if the bird doesn't look exactly like the one in the guide. Look for key features. Finally, read books about birds. There are many wonderful writers like Edwin Teale, Pete Dunn, Ken Kaufman, Thornton Burgess, and others who are fascinating nature writers. Finally, you might be wondering, why should I do birding? It may seem like a lot of time to spend that you just can't spare with work. Or maybe you think, I'm retired now and too old to start something new. You can always come up with lots of excuses, but if you found this discussion even a little interesting, here are a few things to consider. For us, it was a retirement activity that neither of us had done before, so we could both learn it together. At any age, it keeps your mind active and forces you to focus on learning new things. That's always good for your health and well-being, especially as we get older. It takes you interesting places you might not go otherwise. Not only does it give you a reason to travel all over this country, and even to other countries in search of interesting birds, but you might even find yourself at a local landfill or water treatment plant, favorite haunts of birders. Now, the rest of this Birding 101 book is just pretty pictures. It will give you an idea of the variety of interesting birds that are out there for you to find, as well as put some of your newly learned identification skills to work. As you look, don't worry if you don't know the name. Many of these will be birds you've never seen before, but see if you can tell what kind of bird it might be. Especially look at the bill, the habitat, and the general size and shape. I'll pause a moment for you to think before I tell you what it is. It's surprising to see just how many different birds are out there to see, which is part of why birding is so much fun. The Steller's jay is a western cousin to our blue jay. The pied-billed grebe is one of our favorite little water birds. The California quail is a common sight on most of the West Coast, as well as the Western Rockies. The red-tailed hawk is one of our most common and easily identified hawks. It is found year-round in all of the contiguous United States. The glossy ibis has many shadings and colors when it turns in the sunlight. This coastal bird can be found year-round in Florida and along the Gulf Coast and as far north as Massachusetts in the summer. If you make it to Central or South America, there's a good chance you'll spot a squirrel cuckoo, a really interesting looking bird. This one was seen in Costa Rica. Purple gallinules can be found in Florida wetlands in the eastern United States, although it is spreading northward. It is very common in much of Central and South America. This snowy egret is sitting on its nest and showing all of its beautiful breeding feathers. The brown thrasher mimics other bird calls, just like the mockingbird and the catbird do. You can tell which one you're hearing by the number of times it repeats each call. The catbird sings each call once, the brown thrasher twice, and the mockingbird 3 or more times. The loggerhead shrike is sometimes called the butcher bird because it impales the small insects it catches on thorns, leaving them to eat later. Pine grosbeaks are occasional winter visitors to New England when food is scarce in their normal habitat further north. The female is mostly yellow. The great horned owl is one of the most common owls in all of the United States. They sit quietly by day, but hunt all night. You may have seen cedar waxwings at your feeder, but this is the much less common Bohemian waxwing. Waxwings get their name from the red spots on their wings, which look like the red sealing wax that used to be used on letters and state seals. The larger Bohemian waxwing has more bright markings on its wings than the smaller cedar waxwing. Soras are found throughout the U.S. in warm weather, but are very hard to spot as they usually hide deep in the reeds. Here's a movie of this one. While you seldom get this clear a view, their descending whinny call is easy to identify. Red-shouldered hawks have become more common in Connecticut in recent years as temperatures have warmed. Another southern bird that is gradually moving into our area is the red-headed woodpecker. One of the most widely seen birds in North America is the red-winged blackbird. They live year-round in much of the U.S., but not in New England. Here, their constant calls and display of their bright red epaulets marks the return of spring. However, there's an interesting twist to identifying this bird. While most people have no trouble identifying the male, the female red-winged blackbird looks like a big sparrow and often fools even experienced birders. The white-throated sparrow is one of our favorite winter birds in Connecticut. The ruby-crowned kinglet is a tiny bird which hops around very rapidly high up in the trees and doesn't often show his ruby crown. The harlequin duck, one of our more dramatically marked ducks, likes to feed in very cold, rapidly moving streams or near the coastline in breaking waves. Certainly one of our oddest looking birds is the Clark's nutcracker, a bird found at high elevations out west. A very hard to find and secretive bird of the marshes is the least bittern. Look at the way it hangs on to those reeds. This spectacular bird spends the spring and summer up around the North Polar area. However, it winters along the eastern seaboard from Georgia up to Greenland, where we might have a chance to spot one. On the islands of Trinidad and Tobago, you can see the aptly named white-bearded manakin. This fascinating tiny bird makes loud clicks as it pops through the air in 6-foot-long leaps when performing its breeding display. And on those same islands, you might see this beautiful ruby topaz hummingbird, or this graceful red-billed tropic bird. Of course, you remember this bird from when we looked it up in our bird guides earlier in the program, the cinnamon teal. So there you have it, Birding 101. I hope you've enjoyed this short introduction to birding and will decide that perhaps it's time for you to start pursuing this wonderful pastime. Thanks for watching.